If you haven't heard of EMDR, let me just kind of give you a brief definition of it, and then I'm going to share my understanding from a non-clinical perspective. I am not a counselor, but somebody who has received the benefits of EMDR and how it has helped me. So just share a little bit about my experiences so that you can decide whether or not EMDR might be an option for you. Okay, EMDR stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. It's been around for, 30, 40 years, and I think it's Dr. Francine Shapiro who kind of formally put this EMDR therapy together, and I'm going to share some links below. Basically, EMDR I summarize as a natural way of releasing trauma from the brain and a high storage of difficult emotions that kind of can tend to get stuck, and as a result, your body can have a lot of reactions. And I experienced that after we came back from serving as foster parents on a ranch with up to 12 children in our home, and just going through extreme stress, and then also realizing that different things in life actually built up, like smaller traumas build up to a response inside of me, very similar to one large trauma. And I think that's really important to understand that PTSD and dealing with high levels of anxiety or trauma don't necessarily need to come from one extreme event. There can be things that pile up and have that same reaction. And so looking at EMDR as an option for me was an option before going to medication. I wanted to make sure that I was doing the things that I could do to get healing inside of my head as well as my heart. And sometimes we can be really pursuing God and pursuing the things that God has for us in his scripture and his word and his truth, but we're still in the same patterns and the same cycles. And so for me, and having these reactionary responses, to be able to go, okay, how can I help my body have some space and a little more bandwidth to handle the difficult emotions that are constantly coming to the surface? There are faulty belief systems tied to it, and I've been able to receive healing through the Unleash tool, which is just about in its formal release stage for you guys. It's a heart and soul care sheets. However, I still needed something that went a little bit further, and I've done several sessions of EMDR with a couple different therapists, and just recently returned to my local therapist for EMDR. So what happens in sessions basically is you start off with kind of an intake and identifying the things that are happening, the triggers and the events, and then the therapist will help you decide what perspective to tackle the issue at. So for example, maybe it's a current recent events, and they kind of tackle things top down, or she would say bottom up, because it is actually rooted in childhood or events that happened a long time ago. And so we ended up going a couple of different ways, but some of the things that I initially worked on really were at an early level is what came up, and then a few of the current circumstances. And in the first session, we worked together to identify kind of a safe place. And what's happening is, let me step back, because I haven't clarified what happens in eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. Basically, what's happening is it's activating the right and the left sides of the brain together, and it helps. The amygdala is a part of your brain. It helps process and release stored emotions and stored traumatic memories. And so you, in general, when you're going through EMDR sessions, you're going through a situation or circumstance that brings really difficult emotions to the surface, and then you're letting some of that out and reprocessing it, and in the process, identifying the faulty belief patterns and moving towards a healthy belief. So for me, in that first session, in creating safety, just being able to visualize, I use tappers. They vibrate in the hand, and it would go back and forth from left to right. And visualizing, for me, it was a serene place with Jesus. And inevitably, I think because of my faith and my desire to understand God more and to seek him, Jesus would show up in virtually every session of EMDR in some way, or speak to me in some way. And it was really powerful. Some of those sessions have just really stuck with me. And that first one, especially, I'm not going to go into the details of what God revealed to me, but I will say this, in one part of that session, there was a word that was supposed to be my safe word. And when she used that word as the safe word, I was hesitant to say that it was, but I felt like I should say it. And anyway, when she used that word in the session, it actually triggered immense anxiety for me. And the word was enjoy. And I had no idea that there was something tied to the word enjoy that was crippling me. And so that has been a process over the last few years to, I share a mug a friend got me to enjoy the journey, and it's meant a lot to me to remember to enjoy life when I'm kind of feeling encumbered by all the feelings and all the emotions and the challenges and the burden of doing all the things right. And so being able to enjoy things along the way has been a challenge. And by doing that session of EMDR and having that awareness come to mind, we went back and we had to create a safe place to wrap up the session with, but being able to continue working on that as I go through future sessions. And now, so we're working on other areas that are causing some other triggers, all kind of centered around one set of beliefs that I know are there, and I can tell myself not to believe it. You can tell yourself the scriptures that are true and things. We need to identify the lies that we're believing and root them out and choose God's truth in replacement for that. But by doing the EMDR and some of these other therapy processes, it gives us a little more space to be able to do that. And so when anxiety is taking over and it's crippling you physiologically as well, and your brain isn't able to process things the way that it needs to, it's all connected and all interrelated. And for me, I want to take those extra steps to do whatever I can do to help that healing process become more fully integrated inside of me. And so as long as I need to keep doing it, I want to keep going to the EMDR process, because I know that I'm having reactions and that certain things that wouldn't trigger somebody else are very high and built up inside of me. And I do end up having triggers. So if you're looking at EMDR for you or for a loved one, here's some encouragement for you. When the person is going through EMDR, those sessions also can bring, as it's processing and those emotions are coming to the surface and traumatic memories are being released from the amygdala, the goal with the therapist is going to be to bring that session to as much of a closure and a calming place that they can. But before they even start the sessions, they're going to help you make sure that you have techniques and tools and resources that you can use in between sessions to help settle the level of negative and hard feelings that come to the surface. And so sometimes when I've done some of these, more anger is coming to the surface or more sadness, and it takes some time for it to kind of level out. And so the resources that I have would be like there's a tapping emotional freedom technique, I think is a tapping measure that is really pretty easy to use. It seems kind of hokey, but I don't like to use the phrases that are just focused on self. I like to make sure that my phrases are focused on God's word and his truths, that there's phrases that you use when you're doing tapping, but that can be really helpful. And then for even just to call, my therapist helps call this hugging yourself, and you're just kind of tapping and activating both sides of your body and breathing deep, holding the breath and letting it out to release some of that extra anxiety or the difficult emotion that's inside of your body physiologically. So when you have a loved one going through it, if you are able to be there as a support system and to just allow some space for them to process and just to walk with them as they are walking through the healing process, that is super helpful. I had one woman ask if it might be right for her daughter. I don't know the situation, and that's definitely, something God can help you decide on. But if it's something that your child is going to experience, then you have a great opportunity to minister to their heart and to just be there and to sit beside them and to hold them and not fix things, but to just be there and be with them. And that it's tremendous and has tremendous power for healing as well. If you are considering going to EMDR, consider what your resources are. Who do you have that are safe people that you can go to when the emotions get really high? Who do you have that you can talk to and say, I'm going through this process, and so I would like other people to be there and know that I'm walking through this. And not every session is going to be challenging like that, but some will be. I had a few sessions over last summer that brought a lot of anger to the surface, and it took a few weeks for that anger to kind of get into a better rhythm. But overall, my understanding of EMDR is that it's helping the brain regulate and get into better rhythms and to release these things that are so built up that it's fueling higher reactions. And so if we can take a step by choosing a therapist that will walk us through EMDR, they've been trained in it, and especially when we have a therapist that has a similar belief system to us and at least allows us to really seek God in those moments, I think it can be incredibly powerful and a great option for people to consider. I'm going to go ahead and share a few links below of this video, and if you have questions, feel free to ask me if I can help. Like I said, I'm not a counselor. I'm not formally trained in it. I've just been looking into it the last few years, and I've had multiple sessions with a couple different therapists and found a lot of help through EMDR so that the belief systems of God can be really experienced at a deeper level so that I can walk out who I'm called to be. I am praying for you. If you have any prayer requests, feel free to let me know those below as well. And I just love to know that you joined and that you watched or listened. And if you have other topics that you'd like to hear me consider, let me know, and I'll take that into consideration as well. Have a great Friday.